I wore the navy blouse with the soft collar, the one I only pulled out for performance reviews or funerals. It was supposed to be a check-in progress development, maybe even a discussion about the role they hinted at last quarter. The calendar invite was vague, but the subject line said, growth conversation. For one foolish second, I thought they meant mine. HR's glass meeting room always smelled faintly like toner and burnt hope. Dominic was already seated legs crossed, sipping something herbal and expensive from a mug that read, "Teamwork makes the dream work." Denise sat across from him, tapping her tablet like she was trying to summon empathy from its touchscreen. "Thanks for coming." "Soraya, Dominic," said all teeth. "Let's talk about alignment." Denise leaned in like she was about to whisper a secret. "We're restructuring your role to create more fluid support across technical operations." She pulled up a slide titled Mentorship Pathways and gestured toward a headshot of a fresh-faced intern, Caden, the boy who once asked if HTML was a programming language. "He'll be shadowing you," Dominic said, "absorbing core responsibilities. It's a great opportunity for him to learn and for you to develop leadership through delegation." I blinked once. "So he'll be taking over my position." "Not taking over," Denise cooed. "Just parallel exposure." Then she tilted her head, that corporate tilt, the one that makes you feel like a pet being patted before being put down. I reached into my folder, pulled out a 3-page summary of my last quarter's work-resolved incidents. API restores the emergency patch I wrote at 2 a.m. that saved the Q3 report. I placed it on the table without a word. Dominic didn't touch it. Denise did just long enough to slide it aside. "We appreciate your passion," she said, "but we don't negotiate with junior staff." I nodded slowly as if her words had weight, but in truth they floated light, meaningless. My body stayed seated, still cooperative, but my mind was already moving. By the time I walked out, the blouse felt too tight, the hallway too loud. I passed the intern at the snack bar. He waved. I didn't. At my desk, I opened my notebook and wrote 4 words at the top of a blank page. They made a mistake. I didn't protest. I didn't complain. I just stopped asking questions that had never been answered anyway. Monday came and I did what I always did, logged into the infrastructure dashboard before most of the team finished pouring their first cup of coffee. The credential loop on the billing API had failed again. No one had noticed yet. If left alone, it would cause a duplicate invoice chain by Wednesday. I fixed it in 10 minutes, rewrote the patch notes, and made the logs look clean. Brad sent out an email that afternoon titled, "Quick Save on Billing Loop and Thanks Team." He CC'd the VP and tacked on a smiley face. There was no mention of who had actually written the patch or that it was the 3rd time this month I'd patched the same duct-taped mess, but I didn't respond. I didn't even mark the email as read. Instead, I started keeping a private folder, local only, encrypted. Scripts, diagrams, debug notes, not the polished reports they wanted, but the raw process, the real work, the things no one else thought to document. By Wednesday, the new intern, Caden, asked me how to override a dashboard data pull manually. He was polite enough, but the way he held his notepad ready to transcribe every keystroke like he was interviewing a magician irritated me more than it should have. I showed him, then immediately rewrote the script in a way that only I would understand, using variable names that meant nothing to anyone but me. I saved that version to the shared drive. The working version stayed on my own machine. That night, I stayed late. The office lights dimmed after 7 p.m., and the floor went quiet, just the hum of old servers and soft keyboard clicks. No one pinged me. No one asked if I was still there. I walked to the window and looked out over the parking lot where the last cars were leaving. My reflection hovered faintly in the glass, barely visible, just like they wanted. The next morning, I logged in again and ran a silent system health check. Everything was stable, but I wasn't saving anything to their network anymore. That night, I boiled water out of habit, not desire. The peppermint tea bag I dropped into the mug had lost most of its scent, but it felt wrong to sit in my apartment empty-handed. Routine had always been my tether steep sip survive. The photo frame on the bookshelf caught my eye. My mother standing on the porch in her navy work blazer, hands in her pockets, chin high. I remembered the way she used to say it. Some rooms aren't worth staying in, build your own. It never sounded bitter. Just true. I set the mug down and opened my laptop. Not the company, one mine. The screen took a second longer than usual to boot, like even it was hesitant. I hadn't opened LinkedIn in 6 months. It felt like another lifetime. But tonight I clicked in. I didn't update my headline. I didn't change my status. I just started scrolling. Halfway down the notifications buried between recruiter spam and tech layoffs, I saw it. Solera Logistics message from Aaron Lynn, Director of Systems Ops. I hesitated before clicking. I remembered him vaguely. We'd exchanged exactly 3 emails over a broken SSO protocol last winter. His side kept blaming external auth conflicts. I had quietly patched it in 2 hours. No one followed up. The message was short. Soraya. Your name came up during an internal systems review. Did you fix our SSO disaster last year? We think you saved us from a full lockout. Would you have time to talk informal off the record? Just a conversation. I stared at it longer than I meant to. The cursor blinked in the reply box like it was holding its breath. Someone remembered. Someone outside my building, outside my badge swipe, remembered what I did. Not because I spoke loud or demanded credit, but because the systems ran after I touched them. I didn't respond right away. I just closed the tab, turned back to the mug, and took a slow sip of tea. It was still stale. But something about the silence felt less hollow. Aaron set the meeting for Friday morning. I burned one of my PTO days and didn't offer an explanation. Brad didn't ask. He was too busy coordinating a themed Slack channel for Feel Good Friday to notice I'd even filed the request. Solera's offices sat on the 32nd floor of a steel and glass tower overlooking the river. The air smelled like citrus water and deliberate progress. The receptionist offered me espresso before my badge even finished printing. I accepted without hesitation. Aaron met me at the elevator with a quiet smile and firm handshake. Behind him stood Jenna Marquez, Solera's CTO, composed direct, no-nonsense. She led me into a corner conference room with a skyline view and a whiteboard still smudged from someone else's panic. They didn't waste time. Our back end still limps, Jenna said. We've worked around the worst of it, but it's all held together with patches, shortcuts, and inconsistent version control. I nodded once. I didn't need to ask who built it. I already knew. Aaron added, We've flagged issues in every quarterly review, but they've been ignored or blamed on us. And you think I can help? I said, sipping the espresso. We know you can, Jenna replied. You fixed something no one admitted was broken. That's rare and useful. I waited. Jenna leaned forward. We're preparing to audit Veltrix's systems and vendor performance. Internally, for now. But that may change. We'd like your help. Discreetly. Off the books. They weren't offering praise. They were offering trust and the strategy. Aaron slid a folder across the table. Inside access logs, compliance gaps, credential trails, the makings of a roadmap, but no driver. No titles were mentioned, no promises made, just a quiet door opened. I'll think about it, I said, placing the folder into my bag like a surgeon accepting the first X-ray. We shook hands again. No flair. Jenna nodded once, as if this version of the conversation had already happened in her mind. Outside, the breeze off the river caught my coat. I didn't feel like a ghost anymore. I felt like a blueprint. During office hours, I played the part. Slack replies, dashboard fixes, quiet nods in meetings I was never invited to speak in. Brad forwarded an outdated report to the VP with my graphs embedded and his initials stamped on top. I clicked like under the message. Nothing more. At home, I booted up my personal laptop. I hadn't used it this much since grad school, but the keys still knew my rhythm. One window held Solera's back-end schema. Another showed old ticket IDs from Veltrix, each one tied to a flaw no one had admitted existed. I didn't need a forensic team. I had memory muscle and metadata. I found credential chains routed through deprecated endpoints, shared logins embedded in scripts. Patches that fixed nothing just silenced alerts. Every system I'd ever touched left fingerprints. They didn't cover them. They assumed no one would look. I looked. The diagrams started on scrap paper, but migrated to digital flowcharts, each arrow labeled, each flaw marked. I named the folder Restructure, Phase 0. It wasn't dramatic. No angry red X's, no flames drawn around vulnerabilities. Just truth. Layered, documented, time-stamped truth. The deeper I went, the more the silence made sense. I hadn't been overlooked because I was weak. I'd been overlooked because I was invisible by design. My precision made their chaos survivable, and survival kept the bonuses flowing. Celera had given me limited access, not enough to touch production, just enough to compare notes. They didn't push. They didn't hover. They trusted the results would speak louder than introductions. Brad messaged me one night asking if I could make the pie charts look friendlier. I said sure. He never asked where the numbers came from. He never had. That same night, I identified an unpatched route that still pointed to a dead vendor portal. It was a perfect example, clear, traceable, and dangerous. I screen captured it and dropped it into the Phase 0 archive. Then I sat back, took a breath, and renamed the file Proof Turoa 1. The formal offer came on a Thursday afternoon. I was finishing up a compliance mock-up for Brad, one he'd claim as his by morning, when the email pinged in from Jenna. Subject, Audit Leadership Proposal Quay 4. The message was clear. They weren't looking for a consultant anymore. They wanted a lead, someone who understood systems, not just diagrams. Someone who had seen the rot firsthand and wouldn't flinch when it came time to cut. Attached was a draft contract lead systems auditor, full authority, internal clearance. Final say over vendor continuation, budget generous, timeline immediate, and buried halfway down the document in plain language, in the event of vendor non-compliance authority to recommend contract termination, rests with you. Not Jenna, not Aaron, me. It wasn't just an audit, it was a scalpel, and they were handing it to me without apology. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I doubted I could do it, but because for the first time someone else didn't. The version of me who had sat across from Denise and Dominic, who had quietly accepted invisibility because the alternatives were worse, that version had vanished. Slipped between the cracks with every uncredited fix and silently patched error. I didn't respond right away. I printed the offer, slid it under a stack of case notes, opened my planner, flipped past the week ahead. Then with the same pen I used to sign my first job contract 6 years ago, I circled a date in deep black ink Monday, 9:00 a.m., audit kickoff. Not because I needed to remember, but because I wanted to savor the moment I stopped asking for recognition and started writing the rules. The following day, I cleared my personal folder, encrypted everything twice, and began compiling the audit roadmap. The evidence was ready. The case was clean. The final folder was labeled simply Termination Path. I submitted my resignation on a Wednesday morning at 9:02 a.m., sandwiched between two meetings no one had invited me to attend. The HR portal made it feel like I was unsubscribing from a newsletter I never asked to receive. No one responded right away. By noon, Denise sent me an auto-generated message with a PDF attached transition guide for junior employees. The file wouldn't open. Corrupted. Fitting. I saved it to my desktop and renamed it poetry.pdf. Brad showed up around 3:30, smelling like energy drink and ambition. He leaned on the partition between our desks like we were old friends and not a weekly lesson in erasure. So, jumping ship, huh? He said, feigning a chuckle. Let me guess Gen Axis or Celera doesn't matter. They burn through analysts like my ex goes through yoga retreats. I smiled politely. The kind of smile you give a barista who keeps getting your name wrong after a year. Good luck, he added, tapping the edge of my monitor like he owned it. You'll be back. Everyone comes back. I didn't correct him. Instead, I quietly packed my things. A mug I never used. A keyboard I'd brought from home because the office one felt like typing on gravel. A single sticky note with the words, "Silence is a strategy." I left the office just before 5. No one asked where I was going. No one followed me to the elevator. No farewell lunch, no Slack thread. I didn't want one. At home, I opened my paper planner, the one no one else saw. The one where I'd written every fix, every cover-up, every uncredited moment I refused to forget. I flipped forward 1 week and wrote in bold block letters, Audit Day. 9. 1:00 a.m. Conference room 4B. Then I underlined it twice. It wasn't for memory, it was a promise. When I walked back into that building, it wouldn't be with a staff badge and a smile they could ignore. It would be with a laptop full of proof and a title they'd never outrun. The lobby smelled the same printer toner and ego, but I didn't. I walked through the front doors of Veltrix HQ in a tailored navy blazer and clean heels that didn't echo like they used to. My guest badge read, External Auditor, Solera Logistics. No title, no introduction needed. Security waved me through with a nod. No one asked who I was there to see. I took the elevator to the 4th floor. The mirrored panel caught my reflection, same eyes, same posture, but I didn't look tired anymore. I looked aligned, purpose-built, exactly where I needed to be. When the doors opened, the silence dropped first. 2 engineers near the break room froze mid-conversation. Kyle from Data blinked like he'd seen a ghost. And then Denise, clipboard in hand, reusable water bottle clutched like a shield, stepped out of the conference room. Her eyes scanned my badge, stalled, clicked. Soraya, she said, voice thinner than I remembered. Welcome back, thank you, I replied evenly. I'm here for the audit. Her jaw clenched as she nodded toward the glass-walled room behind her. Inside sat Dominic, the VP of Ops, and a few others I recognized, but had never been invited to speak near. I walked in without waiting, took the seat at the head of the table, not the side, not the back, the head. Dominic looked up from a half-finished spreadsheet, his face drained 2 shades lighter. I'm leading this review, I said, opening my laptop. Per clause 9.3 of your contract with Solera, we'll begin with a 12-month retroactive compliance audit, including vendor logs, credential trails, and internal security tickets. The VP of Ops knocked over his coffee. It spilled across a stack of onboarding documents I'd once been asked to reformat for clarity. I didn't flinch. I scrolled to the first slide of my deck. Title System Integrity Findings. Initial batch. Denise sat down slowly. Someone on the call muted themselves just to cough. I clicked into the first case file and the room held its breath. 3 slides in, I paused. I'd like to draw your attention to a document stored in your internal SharePoint environment. Folder path. Vendor assets. Access control. I clicked once. The file name appeared on the screen. Vendor, Final Real Use Vehicle Arts LSX. I let the name sit there a moment like an accusation. Someone on the call shifted in their chair. I continued. This file contains shared credential records for 7 active vendor systems. It is unencrypted. It has no access restrictions. It has been modified 9 times and opened 37. Dominic cleared his throat. We've flagged that before. It was legacy, probably uploaded by one of the juniors. I clicked into the metadata. Last modified by intern summer 22, I said, and last accessed by a device outside your internal VPN, originating from a Newark IP address 3 weeks ago. The VP sat straighter. So you're saying there was a breach? I didn't answer. Not yet. I advanced the slide, highlighted a single entry in the spreadsheet admin access credentials for a deprecated portal copied and pasted across 5 teams. Denise spoke up, then weak but defensive. That file wasn't meant to be permanent. It was a placeholder. Your compliance policy, I replied calmly, explicitly, forbids shared login records in unsecured repositories. There's no such thing as an accidental violation at this level. Dominic shifted in his seat. Honestly, I can't say who was responsible. Probably a junior at the time. I turned fully toward him. I was the junior at the time, I said, and I flagged this file twice. Once in an internal ticket. Once in a postmortem. Both ignored. Silence. Real, heavy silence. No one looked at me directly. I let the moment hang in the air, then slid a folder across the table. Inside were screenshots, timestamps, archived Slack threads, ticket trails with my initials, every warning I had ever logged. "This is just the beginning," I said softly. "The rest is already archived in the review environment." I opened the next tab and the list of violations unfurled like a legal indictment. By the following week, the email went out. Subject: formal termination of vendor agreement. Reason: non-compliance, security negligence. Failure to remediate critical risks. Celera cut ties with Veltrix in 2 sentences. Cold, surgical. Effective immediately. I watched the ripple hit in real time. Support queues froze. Procurement escalated. Executive Slack channels exploded with questions no one could answer. Dominic updated his LinkedIn with a vague post about exploring new directions. The VP of Ops changed his title to include resilience. And Denise Shi went silent. Until Tuesday. She arrived promptly at 2 p.m., escorted by a liaison. Her ID still had the same blue lanyard, her expression somewhere between corporate neutral and anxious defiance. My new office at Celera was minimal glass desk, clean lines, a large monitor already queued with Audit Phase 2. She didn't sit until I gestured. The folder was already on the table. Label: termination recommendation, compliance failure. Inside, itemized citations supporting documentation, signed approvals. Her hand hovered over the folder before she touched it. Her fingers trembled slightly when she flipped the first page. I waited. "I see," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't realize." I looked at her, really looked. The same person who once slid my report aside without reading it. The same one who told me I wasn't high enough to negotiate. Now she was in my office, reading her own name on a formal recommendation she had no control over. I leaned back, calm, unbothered, measured. "We do negotiate now," I said, "but not with people like you." She didn't respond. I let the moment settle, quiet and complete. Later, after she left, I opened my inbox. 2 junior analysts from Veltrix had emailed already. One was looking for mentorship, the other a job. I replied to both. Then I pulled up the next audit phase and created a new folder on the server. I titled it, Redemption Candidates, Internal Review.